Good morning, everybody. Thank you for coming to ShowMeCon. For those of you who are interested in buying a t-shirt, they're available at the front door, and they're $15. Our speaker this morning, Aaron Moog, has over 20 years of experience in the IT industry and over 15 years of experience in information security. He has developed the information security management programs for a large number of Fortune 500 companies and has worked as the CEO of Goliath Security and the founder of Third Party Trust. Please give a warm welcome for Aaron Moog.
That intro makes me sound very fancy. I'm not that fancy. So good morning, everybody. I think there's still some intermingled seats if people want to make their way in. It's pretty full, but I have no idea this many people would be interested in threat hunting at a hacker conference. So I'm just going to kind of dive into it. I'm going to go relatively quickly to leave some time for questions. We don't have a ton of time this morning. But from an agenda perspective, this is not intended to be the world's most technical hunting talk. I am essentially trying to convey concepts, how to help sell it internally, and if you're client-facing, how to sell it to your clients, why it's important, what we sort of believe in as a community. Not that I speak for the entire threat hunting community, but I've been doing it for quite a while. If you are interested in technical talks, you can see me after. I'll point you to some good resources. There's a SANS hunting conference that puts all their videos online. That's fantastic. Super nerdy memory investigation, malware reversing, all that kind of fun stuff. But I'm going to talk about conceptually why are we losing, why are we even talking about hunting, right? If all these products stop everything, why are we here? And I'm going to talk a little bit about technology, not too deep a dive, but mostly about methodology and kind of what I believe in and what I see work in the space. And then we'll do questions if we have time. So why are we losing? Right? So, a lot of companies, a lot of organizations use staffing crisis as a crunch to why they suck at security. We don't have enough people. A lot of, I think this is, the miracle unicorn job postings that somebody's supposed to know 50 different expertise levels and come in for 40 grand a year. But the reality of the situation is we don't have enough smart people deployed strategically across our companies. Big companies suck up a lot of talent. They pay more. So we're seeing obviously a rise in managed services and those types of things. But I believe that any organization with even one security guy can do hunting and be productive at it. The biggest reason for hunting, why these big companies started this. So just to give you guys a little bit of the DNA of this, a lot of this comes out of Google, GE, Lockheed, the big IR shops, where they got tired of putting out fires. I don't know if you guys know this. Google actually calls their IR people janitors. We got tired of running in and doing, very expensive forensic engagements after the fact. So a bunch of smart dudes, smarter than me, sat down and said, let's get proactive about this. Let's start doing IR in the absence of a surety that we're breached, but in the assumption that we're breached. So that's really where that comes from. And so that was as a result of security products, for the most part, aren't especially good at what they do. There's a lot of really good products in the space. I believe in a lot of them, but there's no, silver bullet, no matter what any vendor tells you. So we are over-reliant on security technologies, especially mid-tier shops that don't have, 10,000 employees and 200 security people. And so that's really where hunting came from, and that's why we're losing, is we install firewall, we install antivirus, we install next-gen malware, and we're done. Right? We wait for alerts to start hitting our desk. And that doesn't really work as well as we would hope. The other piece of this is just threats getting better. The manufacturers try to keep up, but the reality is, we are losing every day, right? I mean, it's sort of a frustrating thing for all of us, I'm sure. But definitely that's where hunting came from, if that makes sense to everybody. That was the genesis, is we're getting our asses kicked. Let's be proactive. Let's grab 50 boxes a week and do forensics on them and see if they're compromised. That was the DNA of hunting. It's become Gartner quadrant industry at this point, but reality is it's still a very immature industry. We'll talk a little bit about that, but that's essentially where the DNA of this came from. So why are we doing it? What, guys at least understand a little bit about what it means. So there's this concept in security and especially in IR, of passive alerting. I respond when a box blinks, right? It's great. It's what we all do. That's why we have SOCs. That's why we have managed services. These are good things to do. This is the core of what we do. But there's this concept of active pursuit, right? I'm going to go look. I tell my clients, I'm going to go create trouble where none existed, right? I'm going to ruin your weekend on purpose, right? And that's what we need to be doing. We need to be aggressively looking inside of these systems for evidence of breach, following it to its conclusion. This is also called BYOB, which is bring your own breaches. And that's really, when you get into, and I don't know how many people in this room work IR for a living? Wow. Okay. Not a lot. In our world, we deal a lot with corporate lawyers and PR people and corporate communications. The number one rule of a bad story is control the press, to release it yourself, to understand what you're releasing into the public, in order to control spin, right? That's a very big part of hunting that has nothing to do with security and has everything to do with saving money. So going to your CFO, going to your chief legal officer and saying, I want to build a hunting component because I want you to control when you release to the public if we're breached, that will resonate with them. They will understand that. It is part of their world, right? So that's a big reason why you're seeing it. So companies, again, not calling out anybody who's been breached, but let's say, a company like GE lost some F-35 engine plans to China. They would want to control that story. They don't want the DoD knocking on their door and telling them it happened and now they have to release it because of a FOIA request. It's not good for business. So the other piece of this, and again, there's a lot of concepts here, so I'm just trying to get through them. Dwell time. So considering there's, I think, one IR person in the room, our key metric is what we call dwell time, right? So I would assume most of you are offensive hackers, right? You get on a network, you make it your B, and you're just there, right? You own it, and that's, you begin to dwell. And our job as IR people and hunters is to reduce that dwell time. So depending on who you believe, the average time to discover a breach is 8 to 12 months, right? And 80 to 90% of the time, you're told you're breached by somebody else, right? Meaning Visa, MasterCard, DoD, Secret Service. There's a great T-shirt at Black Hat, I think a year or two ago, that just said, Brian Krebs is my IPS. Right? Which is fantastically good IR slogan. That's bad when, for a while there he was just dumping breaches almost every day, right? So we're trying to get dwell time down to seconds and minutes, if at all possible, from months and years, right? So that's why we do hunting. What's that? I'll settle for an hour. Hour would be great. I think would be a dream. The last piece of this, and I'm not going to get too deep into these concepts, and if you guys want to learn more about the way IR people view threats, and most of you, is the pyramid of pain here, which is not, I didn't invent this. This is an IR concept. I'm blanking on the name of the guy who wrote it. But if you look up pyramid of pain, it's all over the place. This is how complicated it is to catch threats, right? And more specifically malware, but this I think applies to all threats. Hash values, IP addresses, DNS names, things like this, things our AV companies and our blue coats and our proxies give us. It's not that it's simple in the sense of like compared to writing your name on a piece of paper. It's simple compared to catching advanced threat actors. But the farther you go up the pyramid, the harder life gets from an IR perspective, from a hunting perspective. At the top, right, is techniques, tactics, and procedures, right? TTPs, we call them in the IR industry. So we study you guys, right? We go look at new exploits. We go look at the Metasploit module that came out 2 weeks ago, and we have to write queries to reverse that, essentially. So every time you guys think you're cool and you're writing an exploit, you're actually creating more work for me, so stop doing that. We have enough exploits. But the reality is, we have to understand that, and that becomes part of a technique that in general allows us to find you in some capacity. This is also where attribution sits, if you guys are curious. When hunters or IR people say it was China, it was North Korea, it was Russia, I don't know if we can admit this as IR people, but most of the time we're guessing in a certain way. And we do that because they use different TTPs, and they come in different ways. And it's pretty easy to tell We were having this conversation at dinner the other night, even just language kits inside of exploits. And the way some people use Amazon to pivot into environments and some people use compromised servers at other companies. You can sort of tell by how they hacked in who they are, and then we just throw the name in the newspaper to blame China. That's basically the extent of it. We don't really have it cold. You guys are all curious. Anyway, so that's a little bit about hunting and why we do it. So the other reason to do hunting, and this is one CISOs love, is you are special. And what I mean by that is, I don't care if you are at a 500-person company, 10,000-person company, or you're a consultant. Every organization is different from a hunting perspective, right? We all use different AV kits. We all use different remote access to, methodologies. Some companies are heavily invested in cloud and dynamic environments and containerization, which is an IR nightmare. All of these things that are happening are different everywhere, right? So if you walk, even in here in St. Louis, what Monsanto versus what MasterCard is doing, they have the same goals from a security perspective and IT perspective, but they're going about it in different ways, right? So why that matters to us is, we'll get into it, but there's this concept of normalization, which is what's normal in my environment. When I do threat hunting as an engagement, when I go into an organization and do this for a living, the number one job is what's your normal operation? What does this normally look like? When you walk into an environment and say, hey, do you guys normally use PowerShell on your domain controllers? And they go, what's PowerShell? You know they're screwed, right? So that's basically why we do that. So this is a little bit of the how-to side of it. All right, good. So this is, of course, concepts, philosophies, whatever you want to call it, of hunting. Visibility is what we're after, right? I can't catch it if I can't see it. So there's an entire new industry springing up around endpoint detection and response. There's obviously been a lot of network, advanced malware platforms. There's a lot of SSL decryption efforts. There's all these things going on. At its core, that's about visibility. That's about seeing things that you did not see before. The more data you give a hunter, the better job they're going to do. If you give me SIM, I'll do the best job that I can. It's not enough. It's nowhere near enough. Perhaps you have the best SIM in the world. So you got to be able to see it. And then the next concept is normalization. So normalization is tying back a little bit. What's normal in my environment? But more importantly, it's what's normal in an OS. Or what's normal in a network, right? In general, I think most people in here can look at a box and look at the process information and understand what's not normal, right? Oh, LSAS spawned a child process. That probably shouldn't be there. That's pretty bad. Sometimes it's really remedial, like Notepad spawned ABCEXE. That shouldn't be there. But we only do that after we're breached and we go look at the box, right? It's not a great way to do security, right? Let's go look at it before that happens. And this is also the part of hunting that organizations and product companies are trying to build into their products. So when you hear AI or you hear machine learning, that's what that means. That's taking my brain and my team's brain and trying to build it into software, right? Windows doesn't do that. Mac doesn't do that. Linux doesn't do that. Let's stop it or warn you or whatever. Versus, we've seen that threat before, let's stop it, right? Which is signature-based. So behavioral-based, which I'll get into a little bit more, is essentially just normalization. Hey, that shouldn't be there. There's no way you can know every methodology. Even in this room right now, with the talent in this room, you guys all have different methodologies for breaking boxes, right? For sure, right? You could write malware, you could attack it with a remote exploit, you could politely ask the user for their credentials and they'll give them to you, which is really hard to catch from a hunting perspective. But that's what we spend our time doing, is normalization. And the last piece is pretty easily the most important piece, and that's context, right? So can I see it? Is it normal? What does it mean? Right? That's what we do. Context is where products fall short, for the most part. Yeah, that's normal. That's not normal. But what is it doing? What's the point of it being there? Right? I'm working a breach, and a bunch of Citrix users all of a sudden downloaded WinZip, and like, well, that's normal. Yeah, but what are they doing with it? Oh, they're dumping attachments out of email and sending them up to a Gmail. That's probably pretty bad, right? But there's no product in the world that'll stop that, right? If you allow users to install a zip software and you allow them to put an attachment on their desktop, game over, right? So we have to understand that's not normal to see 200 users all of a sudden download one product, start grabbing attachments and uploading them. So human beings are still the best at this, right? It's not even close. The idea behind all three of these concepts is we cast a wide net and we pull it back to the boat and we look through it, right? That's what we do as hunters. It really should be called threat fishing, like if we're not PH but F, because it's not hunting. We're not that cool. We don't have like sniper scopes and we're not out there catching hackers. That's kind of mythologized a little bit. We're basically just show me all the auto starts in an environment and bring it back to me and have a human being look at it and say, does that look normal? Everybody in this room, for the most part, can do that, right? Write a script, grab every auto starter network, bring it back to you. Look at it with human eyes. That's hunting, right? Now, granted, we do it ideally faster and better than that, but you could do that, right? For sure. Everybody in this room could do that. So that's essentially what we do. And then we take all of these things and we build what I call narrative, right? Narrative is the story we're going to tell somebody about what's going on, right? To tell law enforcement, to tell our bosses, to tell the press, whatever it may be, right? So you can, in your model, whatever your threat model is and whatever your hunting model is, provide these details back. These are the kind of areas. How did I find it? What was it? What was it doing? Right? In general, execs are only going to care about context, which is funny because that's the part where the worst at, right? When you sit down with a CIO or you sit down with a CEO or you sit down with a board, you say, you're breached. What did we lose? Right? That's it. Am I hacked? What did I lose? It's two simple questions. That we tend to put up a bunch of charts with IP addresses and data packets and all sorts of other crap that they don't care about, right? We're pretty bad at this. So when you also hear we're bad at board level, this is one of the reasons why, is we suck at context. So, how am I doing? Awesome. So, methodology. And I'm not going to sit here and tell all you guys this is going to work for you in your organizations, to your client base. This is the most complete methodology for endpoint hunting, right? And to kind of get into this a little bit, that is where most organizations and most service providers are focused, right? So if you look at, I think it's MDR is what the space is called now, Managed Detection and Response. It's Gartner quadranted. They got top right, bottom left, you suck, that whole thing, right? That's Managed Detection and Response. That's endpoint focused, right? There are lots of people who are very good at this on a network level, who just do network-based threat hunting. To me, it's like finding a needle in an ocean of needles versus endpoint, which is maybe trying to find it in sort of a great lake of needles. They both suck. They're both hard to do. But doing it on a network level, to me, is tough. Now, granted, I'll take all the network data you want to give me. But this is essentially an endpoint methodology. Behavioral analysis, threat intelligence, malware analysis, right? This is what I do all day, every day. Behavioral analysis is the process of normalization on an endpoint, right? You build rules, you build searches, you build queries, you get the data, right? Visibility, and you look at the data and you deliver it to a human being, right? It's amazing how good human beings are at catching outliers and patterns, right? If you show me, I don't know, on a network there's 40 million processes, if you just do it by commonality, and you get the bottom 10%, right? And then you write rules against that, you're going to catch stuff you didn't know about. 100% of organizations I look at have security breaches. The only thing that differs is how severe it is, right? Is it somebody's tracking your users and trying to sell them crap, or is it you're breached and you're losing data? But everybody's got these problems, right? Which means in 100% of organizations, their security products are not working and they need hunting. So behavioral analysis, you can make a career out of this, right? And people do. It is what we've traditionally done in IR, right? So if I give an IR person a dead box and say, examine this is what we're doing, right? What's normal? Why are these here? What's the date? Building narrative based on dates, which is kind of fallen out of favor a little bit in the hunting community. Because those are easily changed and abstracted. But behavioral baselining and understanding behavioral analysis is really key to hunting. Again, there's so many great technical talks on this that you could talk for an hour about one type of encoded PowerShell or one type of process injection or one type of privilege escalation. You got to know them all, which is hard. So again, this is becoming more specialized. People become. I'm a memory forensics guy. Like the idea of that 5 years ago was crazy. Like that you can make a living off that. Now there's entire companies that just do memory forensics. Behavioral analysis at a fundamental level, if you want to start out. So we all know Windows is the culprit, right? If you want to start out in hunting, cast the net over your Windows behaviors and bring them back to you in some way. Not Windows events, we'll get into that, but actual system process events, and look at them in your hunting. It's a great place to start. So now we're going to talk about threat intelligence. And I'll talk a little bit more. That's another slide, so I'm going to skip this a little bit. Threat intelligence is, we already know this is bad. Save me some time. That's all it is, right? And people hype it a lot. There's a lot of stuff about threat intelligence, and us IR people will fight about its value in different scenarios. But at the end of the day, it's time saver. It's essentially what it is. We already know this is crappy. VirusTotal said it's crappy. Palo said it's crappy. Whatever. We know it's bad. Let's block it. Let's end it. Whatever it may be. Malware analysis. So there's no way human beings can scale to this, in my opinion. There's just not enough people that are good at it, and there's too much nasty stuff in the world. Signature-based AV has kind of failed us in a lot of ways. They're all getting better, for sure. But this is sort of sandboxing and automated malware reversing. There's a million sandboxes in the world. Obviously, probably everybody knows FireEye. They sort of were the first to the space. But there's tons of them out now. There's open source ones. There's a fantastic open source one called Cuckoo. If you don't have a VM with Cuckoo in it, you should. If anything, it's fun to throw your own tools against and see what it would score it as and what its indicators would be. So that's really good. Again, I'm not going to get into product side too much. I talk about it a little bit later. But this is automated. In my model, right, that I use, and a lot of bigger organizations use, is I'm just going to do everything. Every single binary across my network. I don't care where it came from. I don't really care who signed it. I'm going to do it. Right? So some people do this on the network level, like every binary that flies by. Problem with that is people leave your network, they get infected, they come back. It doesn't really help you. So a lot of organizations are going straight to the endpoint. Right? Let's collect it off the endpoint and put it in cloud detonation or whatever you want to call it. And then everything we do in IR should go in an investigation framework. There's, again, a million ways to do this. And I'm not going to get into it because there's religions when it comes to investigation methodologies. I don't care. If you track your stuff, I'm happy. All right, so let's talk a little bit about technology, just so you guys understand space, and this is by no means an endorsement of any of these people. They all have pluses and minuses, and this is obviously a sampling. I could make 10 slides on just advanced prevention, which essentially is hunting in an agent. But a lot of organizations are focused on EDR, which is endpoint detection and response. So if you are an offensive security person, which I would guess most of you are, you should know this space. Right? These are your adversaries now. These are the people trying to catch you. These are what stocks are running when you do a pen test on a network and you compromise something. So post-exploit phase of kill chain, this is what they're using to catch you. Right? And again, these are samples, all very good. Network side, hunting, automated hunting is certainly, the key. A lot of organizations have built their SOCs and their hunting practices around Splunk. I don't think that'd be a surprise to anybody in this room. Traditional SIM, still there. It's still, most of the market because Splunk's, expensive. But it's, again, there's no right way to do this, right? I can tell you some wrong ways if anybody wants to tell me what they're doing later and ask me if it's wrong, but I don't know that it's right for a fact. Advanced prevention, this is theoretically supposed to be making my job easier, and it is in a lot of ways. The new agent-based stuff, that's stopping more threats than ever. It can make it noisier on the management side, but in my perspective, anything that at least alerts me to more threats is good. The open source community around this is killing it right now. So I work with a lot of what I call hipster IT companies that are, cloud and serverless and all this crap, and they still have endpoints. But Google built their own EDR agent. There's one called OS Query that's sort of from the Facebook guys, but they've sort of released it to the wild. That's a little better in Max Linux, but they have a new Windows agent out. If you want to check it out, contribute to it, learn it, these are great places to go. Cuckoo is the open source malware sandbox. Windows, sysinternals, so Mark's team at Microsoft It's sort of an interesting job because they're catching their own problems in a lot of ways, which I guess they always have. But they're doing amazing things around visibility. They, for some reason, have unleashed PowerShell hell on the world. I don't know why they're doing this. I don't know, with the complete lack of understanding of the community. I'm sure it has something to do with Azure, if I had to guess. But it's definitely causing problems. But they are releasing a lot of research and tools to understand PowerShell, to understand what it's doing at its core, how to script it, how to encode it, all those different things. The Facebook guy, or the Netflix guys, I think it is, have FIDO, which is like a event correlation. I think they kind of wrote it to work with Palo, but it does some amazing things with like building a narrative and things like that. And this is just a sample. Volatility and recall on the memory analysis side. I'm sort of team volatility, but they're both really good. If you can learn how to do memory forensics, you could probably double your salary if anyone's interested. It's the hottest thing in IR, and they're paying crazy money for it. So a lot of open source. So not everything on the commercial side has a open source equivalent, but everything in the IR side does, essentially. So for Intel, this gets interesting. There's a lot of people who put a lot of faith in this a few years ago. I don't know if you guys remember, there was a vendor who had like a big pew-pew map of like the world and everybody attacking everybody, and they crashed and burned because nobody actually got value out of it, in my opinion. There are some really cool companies doing really cool things in this space. So, again, when you get into the IR piece of it, there's sort of, we don't really care about IPs and domains. Like, that's not really our thing. Hunters a little bit. Obviously, network guys care about it a lot. The commercial Intel sources, if you want to use them well, get to the TTP level, right? And what I mean by that is understand. I don't really care about the, report about China doing whatever. I don't. It doesn't matter. And they don't really know it for a fact. But in there is little nuggets of truth around the methodologies they use that then I can go reverse engineer and say, how do I hunt on that? Right? So, example, China loves phishing, right? That's their thing. They love dropping, email attachments, right? And I think, Michael came up with an interesting where he just basically wrote a filter to just kill all those attachments and hasn't had any ransomware in forever. But understanding methodologies, and delivery mechanisms and, most of the people in this room, again, I'm making assumptions, are offensive people, shouldn't really have a hard time understanding methodologies, but reversing that back out, right? What kind of footprint does this exploit leave if it's successful and I backdoor this system, right? And then ideally walk down the hall and tell your IR guy if you want to be nice about it. The red team, blue team thing sort of pisses me off a lot of times. I think there's a new movement for purple team, which is making us all one big thing. But you guys are certainly writing exploits and building tools faster than we can counteract them. But it definitely needs a community. So going back here, tons of databases online, open source stuff. The forum stuff, there's the companies that you can pay to sort of watch the forums for your data or to try. There really isn't anybody who watches it for toolkits. There are places that kind of collect malware of the day. There's places that'll give you test malware. There's so much stuff out there. There's not a lot right now about what we call malwareless attacks, which is probably what most of you do, which is tool-based exploiting core Windows components. Like I pop a box and now I open RDP to myself, things like that. So if you want to write an article, I will love it. Social media, it's still how I learn a lot of things. I think most of you are on Twitter. Like there's really good stuff. There's a hashtag DFIR, which is sort of for our IR hunting community. That's really good. If you have the opportunity to join an ISAC, do it. If you guys don't know what ISACs are, each vertical, for the most part, has an ISAC. It all started with DIB, with the industrial-based guys and them sharing data. There's a retail one. There's a financial services one. There's an open source IT one out there. I think somebody needs to start one for gaming. But there's good data there. Again, a lot of it's noise. It's like, hey, I just got scanned from this IP address. Oh, okay. Thank you. I will go make that rule on all my firewalls. It's not how it works. VirusTotal is still the holy grail of hash data. Nothing's even remotely close. Google's been slapping around some vendors about using it lately, but it's still available to everybody here. There's also, and I don't have it on here, there's also, maybe I do, There's also an open source Cuckoo sandbox that's available on, I think it's malware.io, something like that. But open source where you can drop any binary you want and it'll run the Cuckoo information for you, and spit back the results. So if it's not confidential, like if it's not something you wrote, then throw it up there and get the results. So nobody in this room can say they don't have a sandbox because there's one available to all of us. I think some jerks crashed it a while ago, but I think it's back up. Obviously cons, you learn a lot, you see a lot. I bummed, I think yesterday, I forgot who gave it, but yesterday there was a PowerShell talk that I really wanted to go to and I had to be on a conference call, but I'm going to watch it on YouTube. Learning the offensive side of it can help you with the hunting side of it. If you already know the offensive side of it, go watch the videos, go watch Andrew Case, go watch Jack Cook, go watch these guys who are like IR gods and learn from them and build up both sets of their skills. Anyway, so this is just a lot of different data. I'm not going to delve too much into the commercial stuff. If you guys want to talk about commercial threat intel, find me later and I will talk shit about it. All right, so where do I start? Right, what do I do? Right, processes. Right, that's the really good stuff. Right, understanding what's running on your network. Right, persistence is also an interesting place, and the two definitely go together. But you guys, and you're advanced security people, but you would be amazed by how many normal companies in America have no idea what's running on their network, or maybe you wouldn't be. That's hunting at its core. Go back to your shop, look at everything that's running. Just look at it. Right? Write a script, collect it, use Splunk, use whatever. Show me that list. Every process that's running. I guarantee you're going to see something weird. What the hell is that? Why is that? Right? That process shouldn't start out of temp. Right? And these hacker guys think they're so damn clever. And if I ever find one, I'm going to choke them to death. But they obfuscate it so that when you just look at it, it looks normal, and then you look at it, it's starting from a weird directory or whatever. SANS puts out a list of typical starting directories for core Windows processes. So you can write scripts that say if it's not starting from that directory, then it's probably bad. So if I had a nickel for every SVCH0STEXE I ever saw running out of some temp directory, it's ridiculous. So, but again, if you look at starting directories and you look at process names, just look at it. That's hunting, and you'll kill it, and you'll find all sorts of fun stuff. User account behavior. This is sort of where we get into lateral movement, privilege escalation kind of stuff, right? That user doesn't typically log in there. There's an entire new field called UBA around this. It's sort of new, and we'll see. But it's good. It's good data. My opinion is generally by that point you're so screwed that who cares? Like I got to catch it right before that happens. So you want kind of my philosophy of it. Exploits are going to happen, right? Exploits are going to exploit. The lateral movement piece of it, it's great. Try to catch it. But the reality of our lives is that we're going to catch it on persistence. We are. That's where we're going to catch it, right? That's by its nature. Once you've exploited a system, you're going to modify it. You're going to change something, right? Either I'm going to steal data, or I'm going to leave a backdoor, or I'm going to set up remote access, or I'm going to do whatever. That's where you catch it. You want to spend time there, right? So IP domain connections. This is interesting. Some of the malware sandboxes now are starting to sort of prefetch IPs and domains when you run a piece of malware to sort of help you build better lists. You don't have to have it running first. Again, if you want a pew-pew map of like, oh, there's that one connection to China, give you a hint, they don't really hack you from China. It's not really how it works. They hack you from Amazon. They hack you from Dropbox. Right? That's how it happens. But it's useful information. Again, probably better for normalization, right? Of saying, hey, I don't use Google Drive. Why is that installed on one box? Right? And if it's because the users want to use it, go slap them in the head and say, stop doing that. Use this. This is what we gave you, paid all this money for, right? It will also lead to a better IT quality. It really will, especially when it comes to cloud services. There's some really good products out now that will discover all the applications that you're supposed to be using. There's a new field called CASB, which is like SaaS prevention. Again, not to get too down the rabbit hole. There's good data out of there if you're a hunter, right? I'll go to CASB and be like, give me the logs. And they're like, why? We're just stopping Salesforce. I'm like, no, I want to see the storage platforms that people are trying to get to that they're not supposed to get to. You find exfil all day there, right? Sometimes you'll see literally just like they're going straight, and you can see where they're going inside of their web sessions, and you can go right to that box and not hunt and go do IR. So very good stuff. Geography, sure, great. Network activity volume's interesting. This isn't as good an indicator as it used to be, just because everything's so damn noisy now. And there's so many things that talk out to service providers, that it's really, really hard to do this based on network volume. But, could be a good indicator if you got it. AV logs. I know groups that do hunting strictly based on their AV logs. That's how they understand campaigns against them. They understand delivery mechanisms. You can learn as much about your environment by what's stopped as what's not stopped, right? Somebody after me, somebody deliberately trying to infect my users, build the narrative in reverse from how that malware was delivered. Some crappy drive-by download because somebody went to a porn site, don't care, right? Oh, look, Outlook spawned Acrobat, which spawned this, right? And then now it went and grabbed the download, right? Went to GitHub, which, by the way, is a huge delivery mechanism for malware. That's interesting to me. Let's go fill out that narrative, right? This is one. Next one, command line PowerShell. Again, you want to know if a network's owned, run an EDR agent or run a network agent or run a Splunk collector and just look at all the PowerShell, right? You'll see horrible, horrible things, right? Enumeration of accounts and lateral movement, all these bad things. I am really confident the guys at Microsoft really even understand the power of this thing yet. But hackers sure do. They seem to be very fond of it, especially once they're in. And then Windows events, going old school, right? Is how we used to do forensics, right? We'd show up, grab a Windows events, and still do. Not as effective as it once was. And obviously this is something that hackers are very aware of and will remove. But still some good stuff in there. I think Jack Cook from GE just gave a talk at SANS about what events mean what. So if you want to go look at that, really good stuff. He's a very smart dude. So again, just some interesting places to look for it. So how am I doing? All right, perfect. So let's wrap it up. The most important thing you can do, and I don't care if you're offensive or defensive, blue team or purple team, I don't care, understanding what's normal on your network. I know it's hard. Get it, especially if you're big. But it's critical. I am doing a lot of projects right now to help companies understand this in cloud. Something that, again, I love developers. They're my favorite people. But they go to Amazon, they build this crap, and they have no documentation on what's normal. And then you have to come in, per usual, clean it up and say what's normal, right? So get out ahead of that, right? There's this entire new generation of platforms springing up. And Amazon is nice, because it's hard to put not normal stuff in there because it's just checkboxes. Like I want WAF, I want, I want whatever, right? So the add-on stuff is a lot easier to catch, if you will, because we don't have our typical IT user set. But that's the number one thing you can do in hunting. Figure out what's normal, write it rules, or hunt for what's not normal. Starting with alerts you already have is great. I was just talking about the AV guys who start there for campaign management, understanding what people are campaigning against them. Endpoints, right? Critical. That's where the juicy stuff's happening. Again, most breaches I work start with endpoints. I know it's weird. I started, most of my career has been in offensive security, right? So I worked at iActive, ran Neo-Hapsis Labs. I'm a hacker. My background is that. And I've gone to the good side. Didn't kill my father, but, so the reality of how we do pen testing, there's very little correlation of how actual breaches happen, unfortunately. Most of the time, it's because our clients won't let us, or our organizations won't let us do real attacks, right? But the days of sort of remote exploits leading to compromise from hackers doesn't really happen that much anymore, right? Sort of talk about it that it does, and it by no means am I saying it doesn't happen, but the reality of breaches is some user clicked on something dumb. I've got the box. I'm going to use Windows tools to laterally move. And it's game over. That's how breaches happen, right? So all these breaches you read about and the thousands of others you don't, most of the time that's the methodology. Right? I mean, boxes still get popped. Of course they do, right? Crappy web apps keep us in business, right, as hackers. But the reality of that is not as much as it used to be. So I think as offensive security people, you should understand the way endpoints are compromised, how compromises are delivered, how they're monitored for so you can evade them. All those things have to become part of the offensive toolkit so that you can teach companies how to stop it, right? If all we're doing is scanning a network with Qualys and then trying to pop it with Metasploit, how much service are we really doing our clients, right, when that's not how they're going to get breached? Convince them to let you deliver malware, right? Let's do that. Let's try to get them to allow us to do that. Convince your own company that you need to do that. And there's lots of malware kits out there that are non-hostile and C2 controlled by you. And I do a lot of, I think there's a capture the flag in here. I'll do sort of capture the flag with SOCs, right, where I'm sitting in the SOC and I have my pen testers attack it and see if we can catch them, right, using actual real methodologies, not loud-ass scanners, right? Anyway, so that's something to do. Threat intelligence, again, there's community-based, there's commercial. Most vendors that you have in your shops, whether they're your partners or your customer of them, have some group, right? Palo Alto has one of the best intel groups in the country. I don't think most people know that, right? It's a firewall. Click, 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 click. Yeah, no, if you spend a lot of money with them, go yell at Palo and be like, I want access to the Area 41 guys or whatever the heck they're called. And I want a briefing from them about whatever. It's fantastic. They're really good at it. They hide them, right, kind of in their shop, but you can get access to them. Symantec has fantastic malware researchers. You can get them on the phone, right? So anyway, so threat intelligence, I don't know, some, hey, $250,000 a year, is it worth it? We can have those conversations, but it's definitely worth looking at. Be proactive. That's what we're talking about. That's hunting, right? Get out there, catch stuff. Don't be a victim. One of the benefits of hunting is, and this is one of the ways I see people getting it funded, is you can make it more expensive for people to hack you. What I mean by expensive is time, right? We all play whack-a-mole, right? Oh, stop. If you get really good at that, maybe they get bored and go away. But ideally, right, you make it harder for them to compromise you by killing their dwell time. If you can take dwell time to an hour, most people are going to leave you alone, right? It'd be too annoying, especially when I can go down the street to these guys and they won't know that I'm there for 2 years, right? It's the old thing, right? You don't have to run faster than the bear, you just have to run faster than the friend you're with, right? It's exactly true in hunting. Anyway, so that's kind of my notes. I think we have 8 minutes, 7 minutes, 8 minutes. I haven't looked at you once for the timer. Feel bad. I could have gone over. All right, so that's it. This is me. If you want to email me, I'm on LinkedIn. I'm AAMogue on Twitter. But if you, obviously, some of this stuff can be really, really sensitive, and you don't necessarily want to talk about it in front of a big group. I get it. But I have a few minutes for questions, if anybody has questions. No? You guys all know everything there is to know about hunting? How good they are at hunting, or how much they're helpful with hunting? Okay. Good at? No. There are, it's like anything else. A lot of the money is still being spent on offensive sec, right? So whether it's NSA or FBI or whatever, they're still spending most of their money on compromising other people. The defensive side always suffers. I don't want to disparage it. I've never had a positive interaction with local law enforcement, both in my personal life and in security. State, there's some state police guys who know what they're doing forensically. I tend to get them involved more in. So again, like any IR thing, one of the ancillary things that happens is you'll find weird stuff, right? So occasionally in our hunts, we'll find child porn. It happens, right? You see somebody exfiltrating a weird IP address, you dig into it, it's something bad, right? That's their bread and butter. Like, punt, give it to them. They're awesome at it, right? I don't want it. Fraud, yeah, give it to them. I don't want it. Interstate fraud, FBI, go for it. Russia hacker breaking in your network and dropping malware, they don't know any more than we know, right? And you can, if it's real nasty, right, you can get the Secret Service involved, and they'll usually set up a coordinator that will sort of quarterback it between the agencies. But if you were big enough to know that you needed that, you'd probably already know them, if that makes sense. Yeah, I mean, it's kind of a mixed bag. I mean, if you get to know, like, most state trooper and state police organizations have a forensic unit. A lot of them go to, what's the federal, the group that intermingles with local people to try and get law enforcement to. InfraGard, thank you. InfraGard. A lot of those state guys show up at InfraGard, and they love to talk. They'll take intel from you. You can give them intel. But yeah, are they the people you call when you're pop? Probably not.
There's special SIGs now with InfraGard. You can join IT, healthcare, whatever, to share your data.
Yeah.
Pretty much one way.
Yeah, that's the problem with it too. Like, you'll call Secret Service, you'll be like, hey, we're popped, and send us the data, and they'll never call you back. Right? They're just like, thank you. We're gonna go worry about defense industrial base stuff now, or whatever. Or, the DNC or RNC, right? Any other questions? Did I answer your question?
On the vendor side, I know there's a new thing out there now, but threat hunting has actually become kind of a requirement alongside penetration testing and threat hunting. So for those of us who don't have real advanced threat hunting shops, like we use mild threat hunting, but in addition to that, how often do you suggest to bring a threat hunting service in-house? Is it annually like in testing? Is it every quarter? What are we looking at?
All right. For those of you who couldn't hear, the question is, so how do you compare threat hunting, pen tests, scheduling, especially if you're going to bring vendors in? It ain't cheap for the most part. It's pretty expensive to bring vendors in to do it. There is sort of a new audience of companies that are doing it as a managed service where it's, you probably end up saving yourself a little money. All hunting is better continuous for sure, right? Than once a year or once a quarter. I have a lot of organizations I work with who do it on acquisition, and they do it sort of maybe once a year. They can find the budget. It is exceptionally hard to come in and find a threat as a new person to the environment versus being there the whole time, right? So sort of the, picking up somebody in a bar versus your wife, right? It's like, what are my chances here, right? One, and the other one's a stranger, right? So it's definitely hard to come in. So you do get value out of continuous. It's not like pen testing, right? Well, I'd say, let's try a different firm every quarter. Like, you're gonna have to spend a lot of money for not a lot of familiarity, right? So, I think that, if you can build your own components and then bring in advisors, that's the best. If you can't afford to do it full time, right? So, I'm gonna go buy carbon black. I'm gonna leave it sit there. I don't have time to look at it every day, but I got it. It's running. I'm using it. I have some level of expertise with it. And now I want extra expertise. I'm gonna go grab somebody. Right, and apply them to that environment. It's when they bring in their own environment and then leave, and somebody else brings in their own environment, leaves, you end up losing a little bit of economy as a scale. If that makes sense. But I would recommend, at a minimum, right, you get a tool that you can at least look at. Like, if you're going to spend money, if you look at it and say, oh, these guys are $100,000 for doing a threat assessment, or I can spend $100,000 on a product that'll give me this data, get the data. All right, 2 minutes. Any other questions? Yes, sir.
More of a feedback to it. All of us have a place to start. We all have some software distribution mechanism, SSCN, DFIG, whatever. You can push a batch file job out there, auto runs, start with persistence, like Aaron says, and large rich keys, whether you use system stools or login D, and start actually adding one thing at a time and push it out with something we already have. We all patch, we all have a tool. We just, from a security perspective, have to utilize that and start saying, what do I look for? And he's dead right. Look for persistence first. I would also see those large rich keys. It's easy.
So for those of you who couldn't hear, he said I'm a genius, and I was right. I think that's pretty much the gist of it. Yeah, I mean, same messaging. Start small, scale up. Start with registry, auto starts, processes. Work your way up. All right, I think I'm going to kill it because we're done, right? All right, awesome. Thank you, everybody.